My name is Alina Voss, and I am 24 years old. I work as a junior archivist at the city's Historical Society, a job I love because it lets me spend my days with quiet documents and forgotten stories, far from the noise of my own. My life, if you looked at it from the outside, looked simple. Small apartment, modest car, a cat named Echo. But the truth of my life was written in a different language, one of silent treatments and sharp glances, of birthday cards that never came, and graduation, ceremonies where my seat was always conspicuously empty. For 24 years, I have been the ghost in my own family's grand gilded house. The mistake, the quiet one. The one who didn't inherit the Voss genius for real estate, for turning empty plots into towering statements of wealth. I was just Alina. And on my 24th birthday, the ghost was finally, officially, exorcised. The first thing I noticed was the cold. Not the pleasant chill of the mansion's aggressive air conditioning, but a deep, personal cold that had nothing to do with the thermostat. It was the cold of my father's eyes as he looked at me across the vast mahogany dining table, a table usually groaning under the weight of catered birthday feasts. Today it was bare except for a single, small cake with 24 candles, their flames flickering pathetically in the cavernous silence. My mother stood beside him, her usual elegant composure replaced by a stiff, unnatural posture. My older brother Lucas lounged in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips as he scrolled through his phone. The rest of the extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, filled the seats, a jury already seated and staring. "Alina," my father began, his voice smooth, practiced, the voice he used to close million-dollar deals. "We've been talking." A familiar dread, cold and slick, coiled in my stomach. Talking. That never meant anything good. "Your lifestyle," he continued, choosing his words with cruel precision. "It's become unsustainable. The constant requests for help, the lack of direction. It's a strain on the family's resources and reputation." I stared at him. The cheerful happy birthday song we'd just half-heartedly mumbled still echoing in the air. "What are you talking about, Father?" "Your recent car repair bill," my mother chimed in, her voice like shattered glass. "The loan you asked for last month for your archive project. The overdue credit card. Statements we've been receiving." She shook her head, a slow, disappointed motion. "We've been covering for you for years, Alina, managing the damage. But it has to stop." Lucas finally looked up from his phone, his eyes gleaming. "The family has decided it's best if you find your own path, independently, effective immediately." The words landed like physical blows. Find your own path. It was their phrase for exile, for being cut off. The trust fund my grandmother had set up for my education, a fund I'd used sparingly, terrified of their judgment, would be gone. The vague promises of future support evaporated. I was being disowned on my birthday. I looked around the table at the faces of people I'd once called family. My Aunt Clara wouldn't meet my eyes. My Uncle David studied his nails. My cousins looked fascinated like they were watching a reality show. No one spoke. No one defended me. The betrayal was absolute, a wall of silent agreement. "You're kicking me out," I whispered, the reality of it finally crashing down. My voice sounded small even to me. "We're asking you to leave," my father corrected gently, as if he were doing me a favor. "Your things are already packed. The car is waiting." A strange calm settled over me then, a stillness in the center of the storm. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I simply stood up, the legs of my chair scraping loudly against the marble floor. All eyes were on me. I walked around the table, not towards the door, but towards my father. He looked up, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. I stopped beside him. "You're right, Father," I said, my voice steady. "It is time for a new path." I reached into the pocket of my dress, the simple, secondhand dress I'd worn because I didn't want to seem like I was trying too hard, and pulled out a single, folded piece of paper. It was worn at the creases, the paper soft from being handled. "But you're wrong about one thing." I placed the paper on the table in front of him. His eyes darted to it, then back to my face, a question forming. Before he could speak, I unfolded it. It was a copy of a legal document, the original safely stored with my lawyer. "A will. What is this?" My mother breathed, leaning forward. "This," I said, my eyes scanning the familiar, elegant script of my grandmother's handwriting, a handwriting I'd spent years learning to forge for mundane. "Family notes. Is the last will and testament of Alina Voss, my grandmother, and yours." The silence that followed was thicker, heavier than before. My father's face paled. Lucas's phone clattered onto his plate. "That's impossible," my father said, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. The estate, the company, it was all left to the family trust. To me, was it? I asked, the ghost of a smile touching my lips. I pointed to a specific paragraph. Read it, paragraph 7. To my granddaughter, Alina Voss. I leave my entire shareholding in Voss Holdings, my personal estate, and all liquid assets not otherwise specified. This is in recognition of her quiet strength and her unwavering respect for the true history of our family, a history she has dedicated her life to preserving. The words hung in the air. I saw my Aunt Clara's hand fly to her mouth. My Uncle David leaned back, looking stunned. The cousin's fascination had turned to confusion. "That's a fake," my father stated, but it was a weak denial. He knew, he had to know. The original will had been locked in his study my entire life. A will he had told me was lost, destroyed in a flood in the home office years ago. A flood I had helped him clean up. "Is it?" I whispered. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. The calm was still there, a deep, unshakable pool. You see, Grandmother told me about this will. Years ago, when I was 16, she called me to her room one afternoon when everyone else was out. She said I was the only one who listened to her stories about the real Voss, not just the money. She said I was the only one who cared about the archives, about the history, not just the bottom line. My voice cracked, just for a second, with a rush of long-buried emotion. She said I was her favorite, and she made me promise to keep this safe, to never use it unless I absolutely had to. I looked at my father, at the man who had made me feel like nothing for 2 decades. "You thought you could erase me, that you could rewrite our family's story to make me the villain. But you forgot, didn't you? You forgot that the person who holds the past controls the future." The fallout was not a dramatic explosion. It was a slow, icy implosion. My father tried to bluster, to call it a forgery, a trick. But I had the original document, the notary's seal, the witnesses, my grandmother's old lawyer, now retired, who had been holding it for me, waiting for the day I would need it. One by one, the family turned. My Aunt Clara, tears streaming down her face, whispered, "Alara." She told me she was changing her will. She said she was disappointed in us. My Uncle David simply shook his head, a lifetime of complicity crumbling. Lucas stared at me with a hatred so pure it was almost impressive. They had built their lives on a lie, the lie that they were the worthy heirs, the successful ones, and I was the failure, the lie that my grandmother had scorned me. The truth was the opposite, and the truth was now in my hands. The car waiting to take me away became a waiting room. The family, my family, sat in stunned, crumbling silence. I walked out of that dining room, not as the girl they had just discarded, but as the sole owner of Voss Holdings. I didn't look back. I had spent my life being invisible to them. Now they couldn't take their eyes off me. And that, I decided, standing on the porch of the house that was now legally mine, was the sweetest revenge of all. The next morning, the world had changed. The Voss family empire, the thing they had wielded like a weapon against me, was mine, and I knew exactly what I was going to do with it. If you've ever felt invisible, ever been the family scapegoat, ever had someone rewrite your story to make you the villain, I see you, and I hope my story reminds you that the most powerful weapon you have is your truth. Thank you for listening to my story today. If you connected with this, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe for more stories of resilience, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. I'll see you in the next one. The morning sun streamed through the tall, leaded glass windows of the master suite, painting the room in stripes of gold and shadow. I stood at the window, a steaming mug of coffee in my hands, and looked out over the perfectly manicured lawns that stretched down to the iron gates. The world had indeed changed. The silence in the house was no longer the oppressive, judgmental quiet I'd grown up with. It was a hollow, echoing quiet, the sound of a stage after the final curtain, waiting for the next act. My act. The first order of business was not a press conference or a dramatic board takeover. It was laundry. My small, hastily packed suitcase from the night before was empty, and I found myself, absurdly, needing to wash the dress I'd worn to my own disownment. It felt like shedding a skin. As the washing machine hummed in the cavernous, state-of-the-art laundry room, I wandered the halls of the mansion I now owned, but had never truly been allowed to live in. I ran my fingers along the spines of leather-bound books in the library, books I'd been forbidden to touch as a child for fear of smudging them. I opened the door to my grandmother's study, a room that had always been locked, a sanctum I'd only glimpsed through the keyhole. The heavy oak door swung open silently on well-oiled hinges. The air inside was different. It smelled of old paper, sandalwood and her, a faint, floral scent that clung to the air like a ghost. This wasn't just a room. It was a museum of her mind. Her desk was a beautiful, chaotic sprawl of handwritten notes, architectural sketches of the original Voss department store from 1923, and faded photographs. One photo in particular caught my eye. A young Alara, my age, standing proudly in front of a construction site, her arms crossed, her eyes blazing with a determination that mirrored my own. She wasn't just the matriarch. She was the founder. The empire had been hers. My father had inherited it, but he had never built it. He had simply maintained it, and poorly at that. I sat in her chair, the leather creaking under my weight. It felt like an anointing. On the desk, next to a stack of letters tied with a ribbon, was a small, ornate key. It fit a hidden compartment in the desk's roll top. Inside, beneath a velvet lining, was not just the original will but a series of journals. My hands trembled as I opened the top one. The first entry was dated the day my father had taken over as CEO. Arthur is a capable administrator, but he lacks the vision. He sees the company as a cash cow, not a legacy. He wants to sell the historic downtown properties to the highest bidder. I've locked the downtown portfolio in the family trust. Let him try to get at it. I've also arranged for Alina to have the voting shares. She has my eyes. She sees the soul in these bricks and mortar. The others will fight me, but I am still the majority shareholder until my last breath. Let them underestimate her. It's the last lesson I can give my granddaughter. The world will try to erase you. Make sure you have the eraser. I traced her words with my finger. Make sure you have the eraser. She had given me the ultimate eraser, the truth. And she had known, all those years, what my father was capable of. The betrayal was deeper than I'd imagined. She hadn't just hidden the will to protect me from my family. She had hidden it to protect the company from him. The next week was a blur of legal meetings, financial audits, and quiet, seething anger. My lawyer, Mr. Henderson, a man who had served my grandmother loyally for 40 years, laid out the grim reality. My father, Arthur Voss, had been treating the company like his personal ATM. There were unexplained consulting fees to offshore accounts, sweetheart property deals for his cronies, and a staggering amount of debt hidden in shell corporations. The company was not just wealthy. It was teetering on the brink of a financial scandal that would make headlines. He had been planning to sell it off piece by piece, let it die, and blame the underperforming assets on me, the failed daughter, before I could ever have a chance to look at the books. He was going to sacrifice the legacy to cover his tracks, I said quietly, staring at the spreadsheets on Henderson's computer. It appears so, Ms. Voss, Henderson said, his voice grim. Your grandmother saw this coming. The trust structure she put in place. It's ironclad. He can't touch the core assets, but he can still do a lot of damage in the interim. Then we stop him, I said, a cold resolve settling in my bones. Not with lawsuits, not with drama. With facts. We call a board meeting. I want every major investor, every silent partner, every department head there. I'm not asking for their approval. I'm informing them of a change in leadership. The board meeting was scheduled for 3 days later. I spent every hour preparing. I wasn't just the heiress. I was the archivist, the historian. I knew this company's story better than anyone. I dug into the archives, pulling contracts, letters, board minutes from the 1970s. I built a narrative, not just a financial report. I found letters from my grandmother to the city council, fighting to preserve historic buildings. I found photos of the first employees, the original mission statement framed on the wall, to build more than stores, to build community. The morning of the meeting, I stood in front of my closet, walk-in space larger than my old bedroom, and chose a simple, black pantsuit. No armor, no aggression, just clean lines. I pinned my grandmother's vintage Voss Holdings brooch to the lapel. It was a small silver thing shaped like a compass. To find your true north, she'd once said to me. The boardroom was a cathedral of power. A long, obsidian table reflected the faces of 20 men and women, most of whom had known me since I was in diapers. They looked at me with a mixture of pity, curiosity, and condescension. My father sat at the head of the table, looking every inch the CEO in his tailored suit, a small, satisfied smile on his lips. He thought this was a formality, a pro forma approval of his latest scheme. Thank you all for coming, he began, his voice smooth as silk. I know this is short notice, but Alina has requested a few moments to address the family. He said family like it was a euphemism for problem. I walked to the front of the room. No PowerPoint, just me and a single manila folder holding my evidence. Good morning, I said, my voice clear and calm in the silent room. I'll be brief. For 24 years, I have been the ghost in this family. The one who didn't matter. Last week, I was formally disowned. It was a neat, efficient little ceremony. They even packed my bags. I saw a flicker of discomfort in my aunt. Clara's eyes, good. What my family didn't tell you, what they didn't know, was that my disownment was based on a lie they had been telling themselves for decades. My father's smile faltered. Alina, this is not the time or place for... It's exactly the time and place, Father. I opened the folder. This is the last will and testament of Alina Voss, dated 6 months before her death. It has been in my possession, and the possession of my lawyer for 8 years. It has never been contested because it is legal, valid, and witnessed. I pulled out a copy and slid it down the table. Paragraph 7. To me, all of it. A murmur went through the room. My father's face was turning a dangerous shade of red. That document is a forgery. You've always been imaginative. Have I? I asked, pulling out another document. Then explain this. A forensic document examiner's report, commissioned by my lawyer last year. It confirms the signature, the paper, the ink, all authentic to 2008. The same year you told us the original was destroyed in a flood. I looked at him. You destroyed it, didn't you? Or had it destroyed? You paid someone to break into her safe deposit box. He was sputtering now, the smooth CEO crumbling. This is absurd. You have no right to... I have every right, I said, my voice dropping, becoming more intense. Because while you were busy stealing from the company to fund your lifestyle, you forgot who built it. You forgot the history you were supposed to protect. I pulled out a series of photographs and letters. These are from the Downtown Revitalization Project in 1995. You wanted to tear down the old Voss Emporium to build a parking lot. Grandmother stopped you. She called it selling our soul for asphalt. You never forgave her. I laid them out like a prosecutor. You have been mismanaging this company for 20 years. You've hidden over $40 million in debt through Shell, companies in the Cayman Islands. You've approved no-bid contracts for your friends. You've gutted the historical preservation budget while increasing your own discretionary fund by 300%. I looked around the table, making eye contact with each director. You didn't just fail as a father. You failed as a steward, and you brought us all to the brink of ruin. My father stood up, slamming his hands on the table. This is a coup. You're manipulating everyone with sentimental stories. I'm not manipulating anyone, I said, standing my ground. I'm presenting the audited financial statements from the last decade, which my team and I prepared last night. I nodded to Henderson, who began distributing thick binders. You can read it yourself. The numbers don't lie. The question is, what are we going to do about it? The room was dead silent. I could see the gears turning. These were not emotional people. They were capitalists. They cared about the bottom line. And I had just handed them proof that the man they'd trusted with their money was a thief and a liar. My brother Lucas, who had been smirking in the back, finally spoke up, his voice dripping with contempt. This is all very dramatic, Alina. But without the original will, it's just a piece of paper. We can tie this up in court for years. I smiled then. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who had been pushed too far for too long, and had finally found the lever to move the world. The original will is with the probate court. But you're right, Lucas. A piece of paper is nothing without proof of intent. I reached into my folder and pulled out a small digital audio recorder. This is from a conversation I had with my grandmother 2 weeks before she died. She knew you were stealing, Arthur. She knew you were planning to sell the downtown properties. She recorded her wishes. And she told me where to find it. I pressed play. My grandmother's frail but steely voice filled the boardroom. Alina, my dear, if you're listening to this, it means I'm gone and your father is trying to take what isn't his. He thinks money is power. He's wrong. History is power. The truth is power. You hold the shares. You hold the story. Don't let him erase us. The recording ended. The only sound was my father's ragged breathing. The directors were staring at him, their faces masks of disgust and betrayal. One by one, they turned to him. The chairman, an old family friend, spoke first. Arthur, your resignation, effective immediately. All executive powers are suspended pending a full investigation. You can't be serious! My father roared, but it was the roar of a wounded animal, not a leader. I am, the chairman said, his voice cold. The board will elect an interim CEO. I suggest Ms. Voss, given her unique understanding of the company's legacy and its current predicament. A hand went up. Then another. In less than a minute, I was unanimously voted in as the new CEO of Voss Holdings. I looked at my father, now slumped in his chair, the color drained from his face. My brother was staring at the table, his earlier bravado gone. "I don't want your job as a punishment," I said, addressing them both. But my eyes were on my father. "I want it as a promise to my grandmother to rebuild what you tried to destroy, a promise to this company to remember what it stands for, and a promise to myself to finally be someone you can't ignore." I didn't fire him, not then. I had Henderson draw up the paperwork for a leave of absence. With full benefits, a gilded cage. He would have time to think about what he'd done. Lucas I put on administrative leave pending a forensic audit of his own department. The others, the aunts, uncles, cousins who had sat at that birthday table and said nothing. They were cut from the trust. Their dividends were suspended, their influence gone. They were bystanders to a crime, and I had no use for them. The next few months were a whirlwind of 4 a.m. starts and late nights. I moved into the guest wing of the mansion, turning the formal dining room into a war room. Maps of the city's historic districts were pinned to the walls, alongside architectural plans for renovating the old emporium into a museum and cultural center. I sold the offshore shell companies, paid down the debt, and renegotiated the sweetheart deals. I didn't just want to save the company. I wanted to redeem it, and I did it all while wearing my archivist's hat. I found the original blueprints for the downtown properties. I discovered that the land under the first Voss department store was still owned by the family trust, a fact my father had conveniently forgotten to mention. We were sitting on a gold mine of history, not just real estate. One evening late, I was sorting through a box of uncatalogued photos in what was now my office. I found a picture of my grandmother and me when I was about 6. We were in this very room, and she was showing me how to use a letter opener. She was smiling, and I was beaming with pride. I had no memory of this moment. It was like a gift from the past, a reminder that I had always belonged here, in this story. My mother called me a week after the board meeting. I hadn't spoken to her since my birthday. I let it go to voicemail. She called again, and again. On the 4th day, I answered. "Alina," she said, her voice small. I saw the news. "About the downtown project. It's wonderful. It's what grandmother wanted," I said neutrally. "I know I failed you. Your father and we failed you." The words were a whisper. "He told us you were difficult, that you needed to be taught a lesson, that you'd never amount to anything without us." She started to cry, quiet, heaving sobs. "We believed him. We chose him. Over you." The pain was still there, a dull ache. But the anger was gone, burned away by the work, by the purpose. "Why, Mother?" I asked, the question I'd carried my whole life finally voiced. "Because it was easier," she admitted, the confession hanging in the air. "Because he was powerful and we were comfortable. And because you were so much like her." She meant my grandmother, and he hated her. "So he made us hate you by extension." "I need boundaries, Mother," I said, my voice firm but not unkind. "I need you to understand that I am not the girl you could dismiss. I am the CEO of this company. I am the keeper of her legacy. If you want a relationship with me, it can't be on his terms. It can't be about money or status. It has to be about us, if there even is an us anymore." There was a long pause. "I understand," she finally said. "I don't know if I can be what you need, but I would like to try. For you, for Ilara." We didn't hang up with promises of a happy family reunion. We hung up with a fragile, tentative truce. It was more than I'd had a month ago. The final blow to my father came not from me, but from his own greed. The forensic accountants I'd hired, digging into the years of hidden transactions, found a pattern. He hadn't just stolen from the company. He'd stolen from the family trust, my grandmother's personal trust, set up for her grandchildren. He had been funneling money from that into his failing side businesses for years. It was a direct violation of his fiduciary duty as a trustee. It was criminal. The district attorney, who had been quietly watching the company's collapse with interest, opened an investigation. My father was indicted on multiple counts of embezzlement and fraud. The news broke on a Friday night. The family's downfall was now public, a humiliating spectacle. I went to the courthouse for his arraignment. I didn't sit with him. I sat in the public gallery, watching as the man who had once commanded rooms now stood in an orange jumpsuit, his eyes fixed on the ground. He looked up once, found my face in the crowd, and his expression was one of pure, unadulterated hatred. I didn't flinch. I gave him a small, sad smile and a single nod. Not of forgiveness, but of acknowledgement. "I see you, and I have won." Lucas, facing his own audit and likely charges, skipped bail. He vanished, leaving behind a string of debts and a reputation in tatters. Good riddance. The company thrived. The downtown museum project was a resounding success, winning awards and revitalizing the neighborhood. I started a foundation to preserve historic small businesses, using the company's profits. I was interviewed in magazines. The archivist CEO, they called me. I hated the title, but I liked the work. 1 year after the board meeting, I stood on the same balcony where I'd once watched my family drive away. The city lights twinkled below, but my mind was on the past. I had my grandmother's journals spread on a table. I was writing a foreword for a book about the company's history, a project I'd undertaken to finally, properly tell the truth. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Dinner next Sunday, my place. I'm making your favorite, too salty, I know, but I'm practicing. I smiled, a real, full smile that reached my eyes. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. The scars were still there. The trust was broken, perhaps irreparably, but there was a bridge, however fragile, being rebuilt. And I was the one holding the plans. I looked out at the night, no longer a ghost, but the architect of my own life. The girl they had disowned was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who knew her own worth, someone who had turned the weapon of their hatred, their own greed and lies, into the very tools of her salvation. They had tried to erase me. Instead, I had rewritten the story. And this time, I got to choose the ending. If you've ever been told you're not enough, that you don't belong, that your dreams are too big or too quiet, this is for you. Your story isn't over. Sometimes, the very people who try to bury you are just clearing the ground for you to build something new. Thank you for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, please give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe for more stories of resilience and truth, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. I'll see you in the next one.